Flow of Northscale. Year 2074. Earth was no longer the world it once was. Rising seas had swallowed entire nations, leaving nothing but a vast, watery graveyard where cities once thrived. Powerful storms, seemingly fueled by the planet's anger, tore across continents, rendering once stable regions uninhabitable. The rhythm of the seasons had collapsed, replaced by a chaotic cycle of prolonged droughts and relentless floods. Rain fell incessantly for months, then stopped entirely for years, leaving landscapes scorched and barren. Entire ecosystems vanished, and with them, the communities that depended on them. Amid the devastation, the global population had become a mass of wanderers, driven by the search for safety, food, and clean water. The few remaining habitable zones, pockets of land spared from the worst climatic changes, became magnets for these displaced millions. Camps turned into sprawling shantytowns, and governments crumbled under the weight of their own failures. The idea of national borders became almost irrelevant. Survival now depended on being near the emerging megacities that had somehow found a way to function amidst the chaos. One such city was Northscale, a glistening fortress of glass and steel, constructed on the once frozen Arctic tundra. It was one of the last beacons of human ingenuity, its towering spires wrapped in solar collectors, its streets lined with vertical farms. The city's designers had promised a fresh start, a place where advanced technology and sustainable infrastructure could shield its citizens from the worst of the climate's wrath. But Northscale's gleaming exterior masked a society deeply divided. The city's ruling corporations controlled access to everything: energy, food, healthcare, even breathable air. Those who had bought their way into the upper levels lived in comfort, surrounded by cutting-edge amenities and constant artificial sunlight. Below them, in the shadowy lower districts, millions struggled to get by. There, power outages were common, food rations were thin, and survival depended on black market trades and jury-rigged technology. Northscale was a city of two worlds, and the divide between them was growing every day. Mia Sandoval was born into a world already unraveling. Her parents had lived in Mexico City, one of the first major metropolises to be declared unsustainable by the International Climate Council. Floodwaters rose year by year until the city became a stagnant lagoon. Entire neighborhoods sank into the murky depths, and millions were forced to flee. Mia's family was among them, joining a caravan of desperate migrants heading north. By the time she was 6 years old, Mia had already lived through more loss than many experienced in a lifetime. Her father died after a levee burst, sweeping away their temporary shelter. Her mother succumbed to a respiratory illness brought on by the toxic sludge that coated their new home, an overcrowded, makeshift camp built on the edge of a drained reservoir. When her mother passed, Mia was left to fend for herself. She wandered through the camp's muddy alleys until a group of activists, running a small relief operation, took her in. These activists became her new family. They taught her how to survive, how to navigate the fractured system that controlled every resource, and how to fix the patchwork technologies that kept the camps running. Mia proved a quick learner. By her teenage years, she was already skilled at rigging solar panels from salvaged materials and jury-rigging water purifiers out of discarded medical equipment. It was this ingenuity that eventually earned her a spot in Northscale. Now, at 33, Mia had a coveted position as a technician within the city's central energy network. It wasn't glamorous, but it provided her with a stable income and access to the resources she needed to survive. Her job involved maintaining the city's vast array of renewable energy systems, tidal turbines that churned in the icy waters off the coast, geothermal reservoirs that tapped into the Earth's residual heat, and wind farms that soared high above the city's skyline. These systems formed the lifeblood of Northscale, and it was Mia's responsibility to keep that lifeblood flowing. But her position also gave her a window into the city's hidden fractures. She saw how the upper levels received uninterrupted power and perfectly regulated air, while the lower districts suffered rolling blackouts and suffocating heat. She noticed how new technologies were deployed exclusively in the wealthiest neighborhoods, leaving the rest to rely on outdated and failing infrastructure. Though she was now part of the system, Mia could never fully shake her memories of being an outsider, of struggling for every scrap of energy and clean water. Those memories kept her questioning what she saw, even when she knew it might be safer to look away. One frigid morning, Mia's comlink buzzed with an urgent assignment. Her supervisor, Asher, was waiting for her at the main maintenance hub. He was a seasoned engineer, his face weathered and his voice always carrying a faint edge of impatience. As Mia approached his station, Asher handed her a data slate with a scowl.
"Tidal generator 7's acting up again,"
he said, scratching the stubble on his jaw.
"Running too hot. Output's been all over the place. They want it stabilized before the next surge."
He gave her a pointed look.
"Get it done fast. We can't afford another district-wide outage."
Mia nodded, gripping the slate. The tram ride to the generator site was long and silent, save for the low hum of the electric rails. She pulled up the diagnostics as she rode, her eyes narrowing at the data. The generator's power output had fluctuated wildly over the past month. Several backup protocols were active, which was unusual for a system that should have been running smoothly. When she arrived at the generator hub, the Arctic wind howled against the thick walls. The air inside was cold and damp, the faint smell of salt water mixing with a metallic tang of old machinery. As she stepped into the control room, her boots crunched on a fine layer of frost that had crept in through a damaged air seal. She set her toolkit down and began running a series of diagnostics on the turbine's primary components. Hours passed. She replaced corroded conduits, recalibrated the turbine's AI-assisted controllers, and rebooted the core processor. Just as she was finishing, something caught her eye. The data log showed an unauthorized patch in the turbine's software, one she hadn't seen before. The patch rerouted power away from the city's main grid and into a set of storage cells that didn't appear on any official map. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't routine maintenance. This was sabotage. Mia's first instinct was to report the anomaly to Asher. When she brought it up, though, he barely looked at the data.
"That's not our problem,"
he said, already focused on another project.
"Just fix what's broken. Let the suits figure out the rest."
But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a simple miscommunication. Someone had deliberately altered the generator's output, and that someone had access to the city's most sensitive infrastructure. With the Arctic storm looming on the horizon, Mia decided to keep digging, even though she knew it might lead her down a dangerous path. Over the following weeks, Mia worked quietly. She collected logs from other generators, cross-referenced power readings with public distribution records, and reviewed every patch note she could access. A pattern emerged. Power was consistently being siphoned from the lower districts into hidden reserves. The affected areas were always the same. Neighborhoods already struggling with frequent blackouts, where residents relied on patched-together solar arrays and scavenged batteries to survive. The timing of the rerouted power flows was another clue. They always spiked during critical infrastructure tests or after major weather events. It seemed deliberate, like someone was using the city's most vulnerable areas as a buffer to stabilize the energy grid for the wealthier districts. But that wasn't the most troubling discovery. Mia found evidence of large-scale storage units buried deep within Northscale's infrastructure. These units were stockpiling massive amounts of energy, far more than would be needed for any emergency backup. Mia turned to one of her few trusted allies, Kieran, an old friend from her days with the activist group. Kieran now ran a small underground network that tracked resource allocations and exposed corporate misconduct. When she sent him the data, his response came quickly and with urgency.
This isn't just about keeping the city running.
Kieran told her during a secure call.
Someone's consolidating power, literally and figuratively. If they control the energy, they control who gets to live comfortably and who doesn't. And if they're building up reserves, it's not just for emergencies. They're preparing for something.
Mia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic winds. If Kieran was right, this went beyond technical glitches or even corporate greed. It was a deliberate strategy, one that treated human lives as expendable resources. She could no longer pretend it wasn't her problem, but acting on what she knew would be dangerous. She needed to gather more evidence, expose the full scope of what was happening, and she needed to do it without drawing too much attention. With the storm growing closer and the city's energy grid strained to its limits, Mia prepared herself. She wasn't just fixing generators anymore. She was uncovering a conspiracy, one that could determine the future of Northscale and everyone living within its walls. The storm swept in faster than anyone had anticipated. Northscale's usually orderly sky became a churning mass of dark clouds, carrying ice-laden winds that lashed against the city's upper towers. Mia watched from her station in the energy control hub as emergency alerts began streaming in. The Arctic gales were disrupting several wind turbines. Tidal generators were running dangerously hot, and battery reserves were dropping at an alarming rate. Mia had spent weeks uncovering the hidden energy siphons and hoarded reserves buried deep within the city's grid. She knew that the power shortages hitting the lower districts weren't caused by the storm alone. Someone was still diverting critical energy supplies. The storm, however, gave them the perfect cover.
This doesn't add up,
she muttered, running diagnostics on the main network. The pattern was clear. The lower zones were being bled dry, while energy stores that could stabilize the grid remained locked away. She tried bypassing some of the automated controls to redirect power back to the most vulnerable neighborhoods, but the system denied her access. A level of authorization she'd never seen before flashed on her console. Mia's comlink buzzed. It was Kieran.
We're getting reports from the ground,
he said, his voice tense.
The blackouts are spreading. People are freezing in their homes, and it's only going to get worse.
Mia looked around the control hub. Most of the senior engineers had already left, heading to their secure housing units to wait out the storm. The few remaining technicians were focused on maintaining the upper districts. She realized no one here was going to help.
Kieran, I need a distraction.
Mia said.
If I can get into one of the main relay nodes, I can manually reroute the power flow. But I'll need them looking the other way.
There was a pause.
That's risky,
Kieran said, but he didn't argue.
Give me 10 minutes.
Mia grabbed her toolkit and headed toward the nearest service tunnel. The wind outside screamed like a living thing, shaking the city's framework. As she descended into the city's lower levels, she saw the effects of the blackout firsthand. Storefronts plunged into darkness, emergency lights flickering, families huddling in makeshift shelters. Her resolve hardened. When she reached the relay node, the panel was locked. She began bypassing the security protocols, her fingers moving quickly despite the cold biting through her gloves. Every second felt like an hour. If anyone caught her, the consequences would be severe. Kieran's distraction came in the form of a false energy spike near the central tower. Alarms blared overhead, and Mia saw security drones redirect their patrols. Taking advantage of the opening, she finished the override and opened the relay's control interface. With a few keystrokes, she diverted stored power from one of the hidden reserves back into the lower districts. The effect was immediate. Lights flickered back on, heaters roared to life, and the temperature in the streets began to climb. Mia exhaled deeply. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it would get people through the night. As she sealed the panel and disappeared back into the tunnels, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a line. Mia clenched her jaw. She'd known the risks. She'd known someone might come after her, but she hadn't expected the response to be so swift or so thorough.
What about the people I helped?
She asked.
They're still getting power.
Kieran replied.
You gave them a chance to survive the night. But you know how this works. The corporations don't care about that. They care that you stepped out of line.
Mia turned away from the guards and made her way toward a maintenance tunnel. If she could reach her apartment, she could grab the data she'd collected over the past month and go underground. But as she moved deeper into the city's shadows, she noticed more drones hovering in the air, scanning passersby. Her heart raced. The net was closing in the quiet corners of Northscale, where the storm had left puddles of melted frost, and people were just beginning to pick up the pieces. Mia realized she couldn't stay in the city. Not after what she'd done. She'd forced the hand of the system, and the system was pushing back. But she had no regrets. She'd seen the difference her actions made: families warming their homes, children waking up to light instead of darkness. That was worth the price.
As you reflect on Flow of Northscale or prepare for the next story, consider these thought-provoking points: responsibility and the power of technology. The story illustrates how control over energy sources becomes a form of power. Who should have the right to decide how critical resources are distributed? And how can we ensure that technological advancements benefit everyone, not just the privileged few? Social inequality in the age of climate crisis. In the narrative, the most vulnerable groups are always hit hardest. How can society prevent those who are already disadvantaged from being further marginalized when natural disasters and technological systems intersect? The role of energy in future cities. Northscale depends on a complex network of renewable energy sources and advanced storage systems. How can we ensure that future energy infrastructure is not only robust, but also accessible and equitably shared? And what steps can we take today to prepare for similar challenges? The ethical dilemmas behind innovation. Mia discovers that even sophisticated technology can be misused to oppress rather than empower. How can we ensure that new inventions and systems are developed with transparency and accountability so they aren't exploited to take advantage of society's most vulnerable? Thank you for exploring Flow of Northscale with us. Your time and support mean everything. And we hope this story inspired you to reflect on the fine line between innovation and catastrophe. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to help us continue crafting immersive, thought-provoking stories. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your interpretations and ideas. Stay curious, stay engaged, and remember, every ending of a new story.